You know that moment when your entire world shifts in the span of 3 seconds? When everything you thought you knew about your family gets shattered like glass hitting concrete? Well, that happened to me last Tuesday night. And it started with what should have been a simple family dinner. My name is Cordelia Ashworth, and I thought I knew my family. I thought I understood the dynamics, the boundaries, the unspoken rules that kept us all functioning together. But sometimes, the people closest to you can become complete strangers in the blink of an eye. It was supposed to be a celebration. My parents, Edmund and Vivian Ashworth, had just returned from their 3-week European cruise, and they wanted to catch up with everyone. My brother Cassius had driven down from Portland with his wife Beatrice, and I'd brought my 8-year-old daughter Serafina. We were all gathered at my parents' sprawling Victorian home in Salem, Oregon, the same house where Cassius and I had grown up. The dining room looked exactly like it always did for special occasions. Crystal glasses catching the light from the antique chandelier, my mother's finest china arranged perfectly on the mahogany table, and the scent of her famous herb-crusted salmon filling the air. Everything seemed normal, comfortable, familiar. Serafina was being 8. She was excited to see her grandparents, chattering about her recent school play where she'd played a talking tree, showing off the loose tooth that had been wiggling for weeks, and asking a million questions about their cruise. Her voice carried that particular enthusiasm that only children possess, that pure joy that makes them speak just a little too loudly when they're happy. "Grandma Vivian, did you really see dolphins? Real ones? How many? Were they jumping? Can we go on a cruise too, Mommy? Can we? Can we?" I was smiling, watching my parents beam at their granddaughter's excitement. This was exactly what I'd hoped for. Serafina had been having a tough time lately. Her father, my ex-husband Marcus, had moved to Seattle 6 months ago for work, and she'd been struggling with only seeing him every other weekend. These family gatherings meant everything to her, and seeing her so animated and happy made my heart full. But I noticed Cassius getting tense. His jaw was tight, and he kept glancing at Serafina with this look I couldn't quite read. His wife Beatrice seemed uncomfortable too, fidgeting with her napkin and shooting him warning looks across the table. "Serafina, sweetheart," I said gently, "remember to use your inside voice, okay?" She nodded and lowered her voice for about 30 seconds before getting excited again about my father's story about getting lost in Venice. "Edmund, you didn't actually fall into the canal, did you?" She giggled, her voice rising with delight. That's when everything went wrong. Cassius suddenly slammed his hand on the table, making all the glasses jump. "Enough!" he shouted. "This is ridiculous. Can't we have one peaceful meal without this constant noise?" The room went dead silent. Even my parents stopped mid-conversation. I felt my stomach drop, that instinctive mother's protective instinct kicking in as I saw Serafina's face fall. "Cassius," I said carefully, "she's just excited. She's 8 years old." "I don't care if she's 8 or 18, he snapped, his face flushed red. "She's being disrespectful and disruptive. Someone needs to teach her some manners." Before I could respond, before I could even process what was happening, Cassius stood up from his chair, reached across the table, and slapped Serafina across the face. The sound echoed through the dining room like a gunshot. Sharp, final, devastating. Serafina's eyes went wide with shock before filling with tears. Her small hand flew to her cheek, which was already turning red. She looked at me with such confusion, such hurt, that I felt something inside me shatter. And then my parents laughed. Not nervous laughter, not uncomfortable chuckles. They actually laughed as if Cassius had just told a joke. "Well," my father said, wiping his eyes, "that certainly got her attention. Maybe now we can finish our meal in peace." My mother nodded approvingly. "Cassius, you did exactly what needed to be done. Children these days have no respect. In our day, that would have happened much sooner." I sat there, frozen, staring at my daughter's tear-stained face, at my brother's satisfied smirk at my parents' pleased expressions. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. "Mommy," Serafina whispered, her voice so small and broken. "Why did Uncle Cassius hit me?" That's when I snapped back to reality. I stood up so fast my chair fell backward, scooped Serafina into my arms and headed for the door. "Cordelia, where are you going?" my mother called after me. "We haven't finished dinner." I turned back to look at them, these people who had raised me, who I thought I knew. "I'm calling the police," I said, my voice steady despite the rage coursing through my veins. The laughter stopped abruptly. "You're what?" Cassius said, standing up now, his face going pale. "I'm calling the police," I repeated, louder this time. "You just assaulted my daughter, and you all think it's funny." As I carried Serafina out to my car, I could hear them behind me, their voices rising in indignation, in disbelief, in anger. But I didn't care. The only thing that mattered was the little girl in my arms, still crying, still confused about why the adults she trusted had failed her so completely. I was about to discover that calling the police on your own family opens doors you can never close again. The rain was coming down hard as I drove home, matching the storm of emotions churning inside me. Every few seconds, I'd glance in the rear-view mirror at Serafina, who was sitting quietly in her car seat, still touching her cheek. The silence was deafening. "Does it hurt, baby?" I asked softly. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Why did he do that, Mommy?" I didn't have an answer. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that sometimes the people who are supposed to love and protect you are the ones who hurt you? How do you explain that the grandparents she adored had just shown their true colors? When we got home, I immediately went to our medicine cabinet and got some ice wrapped in a soft towel. Serafina sat on the couch, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, while I gently held the ice to her cheek. "I'm going to call the police now, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "They need to know what happened." "Are we in trouble?" she asked, her eyes wide with fear. "No, baby. We're not in trouble. Uncle Cassius is the one who did something wrong. The police need to know so they can make sure it doesn't happen again." My hands were shaking as I dialed 911. The operator's voice was professional, calm, but I could hear the urgency in her questions when I explained that my brother had just assaulted my daughter. "Ma'am, are you in immediate danger? Are you at a safe location?" "We're home now. We're safe." "But my daughter, she has a handprint on her face. My brother slapped her at the family dinner, and my parents thought it was appropriate. I'm dispatching an officer to your location. Can you describe the injury?" I looked at Serafina's face, at the red mark that was already beginning to swell slightly. "It's red and swollen. She's been crying. He hit her hard enough to leave a clear mark. The officer will be there within 15 minutes. Please stay on the line with me until they arrive." Those 15 minutes felt like hours. I held Serafina close, trying to comfort her while my own mind raced. What would happen next? Would my family ever forgive me? Did I even care if they did? When Officer Martinez arrived, she was exactly what we needed. A woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor that immediately put both of us at ease. She knelt down to Serafina's level and spoke to her in a soft voice. "Hi there, sweetheart. I'm Officer Martinez. I heard that someone hurt you today. Can you tell me what happened?" Serafina looked at me, and I nodded encouragingly. In her small voice, she recounted the dinner, how excited she'd been to see her grandparents, how she'd been asking questions about their trip. "And then Uncle Cassius got really mad," she said, her voice getting smaller. "He said I was being too loud and he hit me right here." She pointed to her cheek. Officer Martinez took careful notes and asked to photograph the injury. As she worked, she explained to me what would happen next. "This is clearly assault, Mrs. Ashworth. The fact that your brother is not the child's parent makes this even more serious. We'll need to file a report and investigate further." "What about my parents? They encouraged it. They laughed." "That's concerning. We'll need to speak with all the adults who were present. Can you give me their contact information?" I provided my parents' address and phone number, along with Cassius and Beatrice's information. Officer Martinez explained that they would be interviewed within the next 24 hours. I want you to know that you did the right thing calling us, she said as she prepared to leave. No adult should ever strike a child who isn't their own, and even parents have very strict limits on what's considered appropriate discipline. After she left, I tried to create some normalcy for Serafina. We ordered pizza, watched her favorite Disney movie, and I let her sleep in my bed that night. But I could see the confusion in her eyes, the way she kept touching her cheek, the way she flinched when I moved too quickly. My phone started ringing around 9 p.m. The caller ID showed my mother's number. "Cordelia? What have you done?" she said the moment I answered, her voice shrill with panic. "The police just left here. They questioned your father and me like we were criminals. Mom, Cassius hit Serafina. He slapped her across the face in front of all of us. He disciplined her. She was being disruptive and disrespectful at our dinner table. Someone needed to teach her some manners. She's 8 years old, Mom. She was excited to see you. And even if she was being disruptive, Cassius had no right to lay a hand on her. Don't you dare lecture me about child-rearing, Cordelia. I raised 2 children successfully and we both turned out fine. Did we? Because one of us just assaulted a child and the other thinks it's acceptable." The line went quiet for a moment. When my mother spoke again, her voice was cold, harder than I'd ever heard it. "If you persist with this nonsense, you're going to tear this family apart. Is that really what you want? I want my daughter to be safe. I want her to know that the adults in her life will protect her, not hurt her. You're being dramatic and vindictive. This is about your divorce, isn't it? You're taking out your anger on the rest of us. This has nothing to do with my divorce. This is about a grown man hitting my child. It was a tap, Cordelia. A simple correction. And now you've involved the police in a private family matter." "A tap? Mom, look at the pictures the police took. Look at the mark on her face and tell me it was just a tap." But she'd already hung up. I sat in my quiet living room staring at the phone, feeling more alone than I had since my divorce. The people I'd counted on my entire life had just shown me that they valued their own comfort over my daughter's safety. They'd rather protect Cassius than acknowledge that what he'd done was wrong. But as I checked on Serafina one more time before bed, watching her sleep peacefully with her stuffed elephant clutched in her arms, I knew I'd made the right choice. She looked so small, so innocent, so trusting even after what had happened. I had protected her when the people who should have protected her had failed, and I would continue to protect her, no matter what it cost me. The next morning brought a harsh reality check. My phone had been buzzing all night with missed calls and text messages from various family members. I turned it off after the 10th call, needing some peace to process everything that had happened. Serafina woke up with a bruise on her cheek, the red mark from the night before, now a dark purple that made my stomach turn. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror with the curiosity of a child, touching it gently. "It looks like when I fell off my bike," she said matter-of-factly. "But it feels different." "Different how, sweetheart?" She thought for a moment, her 8-year-old mind trying to process complex emotions. "When I fell off my bike, it hurt, but I knew it was an accident." "This hurts, but it wasn't an accident. Uncle Cassius meant to hurt me." Her words hit me like a physical blow. The clarity of her understanding, the simple truth of it, made me realize just how much this incident had affected her. "You're right, baby. And that's why what he did was wrong. That's why I called the police." I made her favorite breakfast, pancakes with strawberries and whipped cream, and tried to maintain some normalcy. But I couldn't stop thinking about what would happen next. Would my family ever forgive me? More importantly, did I want them to? Around 10 a.m., Officer Martinez called to update me on the investigation. "Mrs. Ashworth, we've spoken with your parents and your brother. I have to tell you their responses were concerning." "What do you mean?" "Your parents are sticking to their story that it was appropriate discipline. Your brother claims he barely touched your daughter, despite the clear evidence of injury. However, your sister-in-law had some interesting things to say." My heart skipped a beat. "Beatrice talked to you?" "She did. Initially, she seemed hesitant, but when we pressed her about what she witnessed, she became more forthcoming. She confirmed that your brother struck your daughter with significant force and that your parents not only approved but encouraged the behavior. I felt a mixture of relief and betrayal. Relief that someone had told the truth. Betrayal that it had taken a police investigation for anyone in my family to acknowledge what had really happened. What happens now? We're forwarding the case to the district attorney's office. They'll decide whether to press charges. In the meantime, I'd recommend documenting everything. Taking more photos of the bruising, keeping a record of any contact from your family members, and considering whether you want to pursue a restraining order. A restraining order? It's something to consider, especially if your family continues to pressure you to drop the matter. Your daughter's safety is the priority here. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen, staring at my phone. The missed calls were from my parents, my brother, several aunts and uncles, and even some family friends. The text messages ranged from angry to pleading to downright threatening. From my mother, "Cordelia, you need to stop this nonsense immediately. You're embarrassing the entire family." From my father, "I'm disappointed in you. This is not how we handle family matters." From my brother, "You're going to regret this. I hope you know what you've done." From my Aunt Millicent, "I can't believe you'd call the police on your own family. What would your grandmother think?" But there was one message that surprised me. It was from my cousin Tabitha, who I hadn't spoken to in months. "Cordelia, I heard what happened. I want you to know that I support you. We need to talk. Can you call me when you get a chance?" I called her back immediately. "Tabitha, thank you for reaching out. I feel like I'm going crazy. Everyone is acting like I'm the one who did something wrong." "You didn't do anything wrong, Cordelia. And I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you months ago." She went on to explain what had happened at the Christmas gathering. How Cassius had grabbed her 4-year-old son Trevor so hard that he'd left bruises on the child's arm. "I saw it happen. But when I confronted him, your parents intervened. They said it was just an accident, that Cassius was just trying to keep Trevor from running into the Christmas tree. They convinced me that making a big deal out of it would just cause family drama." "Tabitha, why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was scared. I was scared of being ostracized from the family. I was scared of being accused of overreacting. And I was scared that if I spoke up, it would get back to my ex-husband and he'd use it against me in our custody battle." "So you just didn't say anything?" "I stopped bringing the boys to family gatherings. I made excuses, said we were too busy, that the boys had other commitments. I thought I was protecting them by avoiding the situation." "But you were protecting Cassius too." "I know, and I've regretted it every day since. When I heard about what happened to Serafina, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. We talked for over an hour. Tabitha told me about other incidents she'd witnessed or heard about, patterns of behavior that had been overlooked or excused by the family. She also offered to speak to the police about what she'd seen. "I should have protected your daughter by speaking up about what happened to my son," she said. "I can't change that now, but I can make sure the truth comes out." That afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. My doorbell rang, and when I looked through the peephole, I saw Beatrice standing on my porch. She looked terrible, pale, exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. "Cordelia, can we talk?" she asked when I opened the door. I hesitated. After everything that had happened, I wasn't sure I was ready to face another family member. But something in her expression made me step aside and let her in. "Serafina's at a friend's house," I said as we settled in my living room. "We can talk freely." Beatrice nodded, then took a deep breath. I wanted to apologize for not stopping what happened, for not speaking up sooner, for enabling this behavior for so long. "What do you mean?" "Cassius has anger issues, Cordelia. He's always had them, but they've gotten worse over the past few years. He's never hit me," she added quickly. "But he's thrown things, punched walls, screamed at me until I cried. And what happened to Serafina? It wasn't the first time he's hurt a child." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about? Remember last Christmas? Your cousin Tabitha's son Trevor? Cassius didn't just grab him to keep him from the tree. He grabbed him because Trevor was being loud and energetic and it annoyed him. The bruises on Trevor's arm were from Cassius's fingers digging into his skin. And you knew about this." I saw it happen. I saw your parents cover it up. I saw Tabitha get pressured into staying quiet, and I did nothing. Why? Because I was scared. Because I've been making excuses for Cassius for years. Because I've been telling myself that he's just stressed, that he doesn't mean it, that he's a good man who just loses his temper sometimes. But you don't believe that anymore. I can't. Not after watching your daughter's face when he hit her. Not after seeing how your parents reacted. I realized that I've been complicit in this, and I can't live with that anymore. She went on to tell me about other incidents I'd never heard about. Times when Cassius had been inappropriate with other children in the family. Times when he'd lost his temper over minor things. Times when my parents had swept his behavior under the rug. I'm leaving him, she said quietly. I've already packed a bag. I'm staying with my sister in Portland until I can figure out what to do next. Beatrice, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to destroy your marriage. You didn't destroy anything, Cordelia. You exposed what was already broken. I've been living in denial for years, and it took watching him hurt an innocent child for me to wake up. Are you going to testify if this goes to court? Yes. I'm going to tell the truth about what I saw, about what I know. It's the least I can do. After she left, I felt a strange mixture of validation and sadness. Validation that I wasn't crazy, that my instincts about my family were correct. Sadness that it had taken this long for anyone to acknowledge the truth. That evening, as I was putting Serafina to bed, she asked me a question that broke my heart. Mommy, are Grandma and Grandpa going to stop loving me because I got Uncle Cassius in trouble? I sat down on her bed and took her small hands in mine. Sweetheart, you didn't get Uncle Cassius in trouble. He got himself in trouble by hitting you. And if Grandma and Grandpa stop loving you because you told the truth about being hurt, then that's their problem, not yours. But I don't want them to stop loving me. I know, baby. I don't want that either. But sometimes, when people do wrong things, they get angry at the people who speak up about it instead of being angry at themselves for doing the wrong thing. That doesn't make sense. You're right. It doesn't make sense. But that's how some adults behave when they don't want to admit they made a mistake. She was quiet for a moment, then asked, Are you going to stop loving me if I'm too loud sometimes? Never, I said firmly. I will never stop loving you. You can be loud, you can be quiet, you can be happy, you can be sad, you can be excited, you can be scared. I will love you no matter what, and I will always protect you. Even if it makes other people mad? Even if it makes other people mad. She hugged me then, and I held her tight, promising myself that I would never let anyone hurt her again. As I lay in bed that night, I thought about the choices I'd made, the family I'd lost, and the daughter I'd protected. It had been the hardest 24 hours of my life, but I knew without a doubt that I'd done the right thing. Some bridges are worth burning when crossing them would put your child in danger. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable the people you love when they're causing harm. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations with lawyers and social workers, new attempts by my family to pressure me into backing down. But tonight, my daughter was safe, and she knew that her mother would always choose her well-being over family peace. That was enough. Turn. Cordelia, I'm very disappointed in you, he said without preamble. Your mother is upstairs crying. Your brother is beside himself. How could you involve the police in a private family matter? Dad, he hit her. He's not her parent. He had no right to lay a hand on her. He's her uncle. He's family. And someone needed to teach her some respect. She's 8 years old. She was excited to see you. She was being a normal, happy child. She was being loud and disruptive. There's a difference. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These were the people who had raised me to stand up for what was right, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Where was that compassion for their own granddaughter? Dad, please try to understand. Put yourself in my shoes. What if someone had slapped me when I was 8? What if they'd slapped Cassius? That's different. We would have deserved it if we were misbehaving. No child deserves to be hit by someone who isn't their parent. And even then, there are limits. You're being ridiculous, Cordelia, and you're going to regret this. He hung up too, I sat in my quiet living room staring at my phone, feeling more alone than I had since my divorce. But when I checked on Serafina, she was sleeping peacefully, her stuffed elephant clutched tight in her arms. She looked so small, so innocent, so trusting. I had done the right thing. I knew it in my bones. But I also knew that my decision had just changed everything about my relationship with my family, possibly forever. The next morning brought a call from my brother himself. "Cordelia, you need to drop this right now," Cassius said without any greeting. "I've got lawyers calling me. This could affect my job, my reputation. All because you couldn't handle a simple correction of your daughter's behavior." "A correction?" I said, my voice rising. "You slapped her across the face." I gave her a light tap to get her attention. "She's obviously been allowed to run wild since your divorce. Someone needs to teach her boundaries. You're not her parent, Cassius. You have no right to discipline her. I'm her uncle. I'm family. And I was doing you a favor by stepping in when you clearly weren't handling the situation." The situation was an 8-year-old being excited to see her grandparents. The situation was a child being disruptive and disrespectful at a family dinner. "But fine, Cordelia. You want to play hardball? Let's play hardball. Don't expect any help from this family when you need it. And don't expect Serafina to have grandparents who want to see her anymore." The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, realizing that my entire support system had just crumbled. But as scary as that was, I knew I had made the right choice. My daughter's safety and well-being had to come first, even if it meant standing alone. Little did I know that I wouldn't be standing alone for long. The next few weeks became a whirlwind of legal appointments, police interviews, and constant family pressure. I had to take time off work to deal with the investigation, and every day brought new challenges that I never could have anticipated. The bruise on Serafina's face gradually faded from dark purple to yellow-green, but the emotional impact lingered. She became more clingy, more hesitant around adults she didn't know well, and she started having nightmares. I found myself researching child psychologists and wondering how long it would take for her to feel safe again. District Attorney Rebecca Cheng called me on a rainy Thursday morning. Her voice was professional but compassionate as she explained the legal situation. "Mrs. Ashworth, we've reviewed all the evidence and witness statements. Your brother is being charged with assault in the 4th degree. It's a misdemeanor, but it will go on his record. What about my parents? They encouraged it. That's much more difficult to prove criminally. However, we have documented their statements to police, and they could face scrutiny if there are future incidents involving children in their care. What does this mean for Cassius? If convicted, he's looking at probation, mandatory anger management classes, and community service. He'll also have a criminal record, which could affect his employment and other aspects of his life." I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and sadness. I wanted accountability, but I'd never imagined it would go this far. Meanwhile, the family pressure intensified. My parents called daily, alternating between guilt trips and outright threats. My father suggested I was mentally unstable from my divorce and needed professional help. My mother accused me of being vindictive and trying to destroy the family out of spite. But the most disturbing call came from my Uncle Frederick, my father's brother, who I'd always respected. "Cordelia, this has gone far enough," he said without preamble. "You need to drop these charges and apologize to your family. Uncle Frederick, Cassius assaulted my daughter. He gave her a small correction for bad behavior. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. There are photographs of the bruise on her face. Children bruise easily. That doesn't mean anything. Are you serious right now?" "I'm serious about family loyalty, Cordelia. I'm serious about not airing our dirty laundry in public. And I'm serious about the fact that if you continue down this path, you'll find yourself very alone. Is that a threat?" "It's a reality. The family has already started talking about cutting you off completely. No more birthday parties, no more holidays, no more family gatherings. Is your pride really worth losing your entire support system?" After he hung up, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the phone, feeling the weight of their coordinated campaign against me. It was clear that they'd all gotten together and decided on their strategy. Isolate me, pressure me, make me feel like I was the problem. But then something unexpected happened. My doorbell rang, and when I opened it, I found my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, standing there with a casserole dish and a concerned expression. "Cordelia, dear, I hope I'm not intruding. I heard about what happened with your family, and I wanted you to know that you're not alone." I was so surprised I almost started crying. "Mrs. Chen, how did you—" "Small neighborhood, sweetheart. Word gets around. And I want you to know that what you did took incredible courage." She came in and sat with me at my kitchen table, sharing her own story about standing up to family members who had hurt her children decades earlier. "It was a different time then," she said. "People didn't talk about these things. But I had to make a choice between family peace and my children's safety. I chose my children, and I've never regretted it." "Were you able to repair the relationships with your family?" "Some of them. The ones who were willing to acknowledge that what happened was wrong and make real changes. The others, well, some relationships aren't worth preserving if they require you to compromise your children's well-being." That afternoon, I received another surprise visitor. Seraphina's teacher, Mrs. Holloway, came by after school with some homework materials and a gentle inquiry about how Seraphina was coping. "I've noticed some changes in her behavior," she said carefully. "She's been more withdrawn, less participatory in class discussions. She mentioned that she had an argument with her uncle and that her face was hurt." I explained the situation, and Mrs. Holloway's expression grew serious. "Mrs. Ashworth, I want you to know that as a mandated reporter, I would have been required to report this incident if Seraphina had come to school with visible injuries. You did exactly what any responsible parent should do." "Thank you. That means a lot to hear. I also want you to know that our school has resources available. We have a counselor who specializes in helping children process traumatic experiences. Would you like me to set up an appointment?" I nodded gratefully. It felt good to have adults in my corner who understood that my priority was my daughter's well-being, not family politics. That evening, as I was helping Seraphina with her homework, she looked up at me with those serious 8-year-old eyes. "Mommy, why is everyone mad at us?" I set down her pencil and really looked at her. "What do you mean, sweetheart? I heard you talking on the phone, and Grandma hasn't called to say good night like she usually does. And Uncle Cassius sent you that angry text message." I realized she'd been absorbing more of this situation than I'd thought. "Some of our family members are upset because they think what Uncle Cassius did was okay, and I think it was wrong." "But it was wrong, wasn't it? He hurt me." "Yes, sweetheart, it was definitely wrong." "Then why are they mad at you instead of him?" Out of the mouths of babes. Sometimes, when people do something wrong, they get angry at the people who point it out instead of being angry at themselves for doing the wrong thing. That's silly. It is silly. But some adults do silly things when they don't want to admit they made a mistake. Are you going to make up with them? I hope so eventually. But only if they can understand that what happened to you was wrong and that it can never happen again. And if they don't understand, then we'll build a family with people who do understand. People who love us and protect us and make us feel safe. She nodded thoughtfully, then went back to her math problems. But I could see the wheels turning in her mind, processing concepts that were far too complex for her age. The next morning brought a call from Tabitha with unexpected news. "Cordelia, I've been talking to other family members, quietly, and you're not going to believe what I've discovered." "What do you mean?" "I've been reaching out to cousins, aunts, uncles, people who have children that have interacted with Cassius over the years, and I'm finding out that what happened to Seraphina wasn't an isolated incident." "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. Aunt Penelope told me that Cassius grabbed her grandson Connor at a family barbecue 2 years ago, left finger marks on his arm. Cousin Marcus said that Cassius lost his temper with his daughter Lily at Easter and screamed at her until she cried. There's a pattern here, Cordelia. Why didn't anyone say anything before? Same reason I didn't say anything about Trevor. Everyone was afraid of causing family drama. Everyone was convinced by our parents that these were isolated incidents, misunderstandings, accidents. But they weren't. No, they weren't. And now that you've spoken up, other people are starting to realize that they should have spoken up too. Are any of them willing to come forward? Penelope is. She feels terrible that she didn't report what happened to Connor. She says if she had, maybe Serafina wouldn't have been hurt. This was a game changer. If there was a documented pattern of behavior, it would strengthen the case significantly and make it much harder for my family to dismiss this as an overreaction. Tabitha, thank you. Thank you for doing this research, for reaching out, for supporting us. Thank you for having the courage to speak up first. You've given the rest of us permission to tell the truth. That afternoon, I called D.A. Chen with the new information. She was very interested in speaking with the other family members who had witnessed Cassius's inappropriate behavior with children. This changes things significantly, she said. A pattern of behavior is much more serious than a single incident. We may be looking at additional charges. What kind of additional charges? Potentially child endangerment, depending on what these other incidents involved. We'll need to interview all the witnesses and gather documentation. I hung up feeling a mixture of vindication and sadness. Vindication that I wasn't crazy, that my instincts about protecting Serafina were correct. Sadness that there had been other children hurt, other incidents that could have been prevented if someone had spoken up sooner. But I also felt something else, a growing sense of strength and purpose. By refusing to back down, by insisting that my daughter's safety mattered more than family harmony, I had inadvertently given other family members the courage to speak their own truths. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is be the first person willing to say that the emperor has no clothes. Sometimes breaking the silence is the only way to break the cycle. That evening, as I tucked Serafina into bed, she said something that brought tears to my eyes. "Mommy, I'm proud of you." "Why, sweetheart?" "Because you protected me even when it was hard, even when it made people mad. Mrs. Holloway says that's what good parents do." Mrs. Holloway is right. I love you, Mommy. I love you too, baby. Always and forever. As I turned off her light and headed back to my own room, I realized that despite everything we'd lost, the family relationships, the sense of security, the comfortable illusions, we'd gained something precious too. We'd gained the knowledge that we could count on each other, that we would always choose truth over convenience, safety over comfort, protection over peace. And that was worth more than all the family dinners in the world. 6 weeks after the dinner that changed everything, I found myself sitting in a courthouse waiting room, clutching Serafina's hand as we waited for Cassius's sentencing hearing. The legal process had moved faster than expected, largely due to the overwhelming evidence and his decision to plead guilty rather than go to trial. The past month and a half had been a roller coaster of emotions, revelations, and family upheaval that I never could have anticipated. What had started as a simple assault case had uncovered a pattern of behavior that went back years, involving multiple children and a family system that had enabled and covered up abuse. "Mommy, do I have to talk to the judge?" Serafina asked, her voice small in the echoing hallway. "No, sweetheart. You already talked to the nice lady prosecutor, remember? Today we're just here to listen." She nodded, but I could see the anxiety in her eyes. Despite weeks of counseling with Dr. Patricia Winters, a child psychologist who specialized in family trauma, Serafina still struggled with the aftermath of that night. She had nightmares sometimes, and she became anxious around loud voices or sudden movements. But she was also showing remarkable resilience. She'd made new friends at school, was excelling in her studies, and had started taking karate classes at her own request. "I want to know how to protect myself," she'd said, and Dr. Winters had agreed it was a healthy way for her to regain a sense of control. D.A. Rebecca Chen approached us with a gentle smile. "Mrs. Ashworth, Serafina, are you ready? The judge is about to begin sentencing." As we entered the courtroom, I saw my family for the first time since that terrible dinner. My parents sat stiffly in the front row, their faces stone cold when they saw us. Cassius sat at the defendant's table with his lawyer, looking older and more haggard than I'd ever seen him. Beatrice was notably absent. She'd filed for divorce 3 weeks earlier and moved permanently to Portland. But there were also unexpected faces in the courtroom. Tabitha sat with her husband, ready to give a victim impact statement about what had happened to her son Trevor. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was there, along with Seraphina's teacher, Mrs. Holloway, both offering moral support. Even my cousin Penelope had driven down from Seattle to speak about the incident with her grandson Connor. Judge Margaret Thornton called the court to order. She was a woman in her 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. She'd been practicing family law for over 30 years, and her reputation for protecting children was well known. "Mr. Ashworth," she said, addressing my brother directly, "you've pleaded guilty to assault in the 4th degree, as well as child endangerment based on the pattern of behavior that has been documented. Before I pass sentence, I want to hear from the victims and their families." D.A. Chen stood up. "Your Honor, we have several people who would like to speak today about how Mr. Ashworth's actions have affected them and their children." I went first. My hands were shaking as I approached the podium, but my voice was steady as I read the statement I'd prepared. "Your Honor, 6 weeks ago, my brother Cassius slapped my 8-year-old daughter across the face at a family dinner. He did this because she was excited to see her grandparents and was asking questions about their vacation. She was being a normal, happy child, and he responded with violence. But this case has revealed that what happened to Seraphina wasn't an isolated incident. My brother has a pattern of inappropriate behavior toward children, and my family has a pattern of covering it up and enabling it. My daughter now has nightmares. She flinches when adults raise their voices. She's had to learn that some of the people she trusted most in the world failed to protect her when she needed them. But she's also learned that speaking up about being hurt is the right thing to do, even when it's hard. She's learned that her safety matters more than keeping peace. And she's learned that her mother will always choose protecting her over protecting family secrets. I don't want revenge against my brother. I want accountability. I want him to get the help he needs so that no other child is hurt. And I want other families to know that it's okay to speak up when children are being harmed, even if the person hurting them is family. Tabitha spoke next, her voice breaking as she described finding bruises on Trevor's arm after the Christmas gathering, and her regret at not reporting it immediately. "I thought I was protecting my family by keeping quiet," she said, "but I was really protecting the person who hurt my child and leaving other children vulnerable. I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life." Penelope's testimony was equally powerful. She described how her grandson Connor had become fearful of family gatherings after Cassius grabbed him roughly at a barbecue, and how she'd convinced herself it was just an accident. "Children don't lie about being hurt," she said. "When a 4-year-old tells you that someone grabbed him too hard and it hurt, you believe them. I failed my grandson by not believing him, and I failed Seraphina by not speaking up sooner. When it was time for the defense to speak, Cassius's lawyer stood up and offered a half-hearted plea for leniency, citing his client's lack of prior criminal record and his willingness to seek counseling. But then Judge Thornton asked Cassius if he wanted to address the court himself. My brother stood up slowly, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of the person I'd grown up with, vulnerable, uncertain, human. "Your Honor, I want to apologize to my niece Seraphina," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was wrong to hit her. I was wrong to lose my temper, and I'm sorry for all the pain I've caused." He turned to look at me directly. "Cordelia, I'm sorry. You were protecting your daughter, and I can't fault you for that. I've been angry about this whole situation, but the truth is, I'm angry at myself. I need help, and I should have gotten it a long time ago." It was the first genuine acknowledgement of wrongdoing I'd heard from any family member since this whole ordeal began. Judge Thornton listened to everything carefully before delivering her sentence. "Mr. Ashworth, the evidence shows a disturbing pattern of aggressive behavior toward children. While this particular incident might seem minor to some, it's part of a larger pattern that cannot be ignored. I'm sentencing you to 1 year of probation, 200 hours of community service working with a children's advocacy organization, mandatory anger management counseling, and a no-contact order with the minor children involved in this case until you complete a family reunification program through the court. Furthermore, I'm ordering that any future contact with minor children in your extended family be supervised until you can demonstrate that you've addressed the underlying issues that led to this behavior. It was more than I had hoped for. The no-contact order meant that Serafina wouldn't have to worry about seeing Cassius at family gatherings until he completed substantial rehabilitation. As we left the courthouse, my parents intercepted us in the parking lot. My father looked older than I'd ever seen him, and my mother's face was streaked with tears. "Cordelia, please," my mother said. "Can we talk? Can we try to work this out as a family?" I looked at them, these people who had raised me, who I'd once looked up to and respected. Part of me wanted to run to them to pretend that everything could go back to the way it was. But then I looked down at Serafina, who was holding my hand tightly, and I remembered what was really important. "I'm willing to talk," I said carefully, "but only if you can acknowledge that what Cassius did was wrong, that your response was wrong, and that changes need to be made to ensure the safety of all the children in our family." My father nodded slowly. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about putting myself in your shoes, and I realized that if someone had hit you when you were 8, I would have been furious. I would have protected you. And I realize," my mother added, her voice thick with emotion, "that we failed Serafina. We failed you. We prioritized family harmony over a child's safety, and that was wrong. It wasn't everything I needed to hear, but it was a start. I think we all need some time," I said, "and probably some family counseling. But I'm willing to work toward rebuilding our relationship if you're willing to do the hard work of examining how we got here." Over the following months, the process of healing was slow and sometimes painful. My parents did enter family counseling both individually and with me. They had to confront some uncomfortable truths about their parenting, their enabling of Cassius's behavior, and their prioritization of family image over family safety. Cassius completed his anger management program and eventually sought additional therapy for deeper emotional issues that had contributed to his inappropriate behavior. He wrote a heartfelt apology letter to Serafina, which we read together and she decided to keep. Serafina continued her own counseling and gradually regained her confidence and sense of security. She remained cautious around certain family members, but she also learned to trust her own instincts about people and situations. The extended family slowly began to heal as well. Tabitha and I became much closer, bonded by our shared experience of having to choose our children's safety over family peace. Other family members began to speak more openly about concerning behaviors they'd witnessed over the years, and new boundaries were established for family gatherings. Not all the relationships were salvageable. Some family members never forgave me for airing dirty laundry and involving the authorities. But I came to realize that those relationships were built on a foundation of silence, an enabling that wasn't healthy anyway. 2 years later, as I watched Serafina blow out the candles on her 10th birthday cake, surrounded by friends and the family members who had done the work to rebuild trust, I reflected on the journey we'd taken. Calling the police on my brother that night was the hardest decision I'd ever made. It cost me some relationships, exposed painful family dynamics, and forced all of us to confront uncomfortable truths. But it also taught my daughter that her safety mattered more than keeping peace. It taught her that speaking up about being hurt was not only acceptable but necessary. And it taught her that there were adults in her life who would always choose her well-being over convenience or comfort. "Make a wish, sweetheart," I said as she prepared to blow out her candles. She closed her eyes tight, took a deep breath, and blew. When she opened her eyes and smiled at me, I saw confidence, strength, and security, all the things I'd feared the terrible dinner might have taken away from her. "What did you wish for?" I asked. "I can't tell you, Mommy, or it won't come true. But it was something really good." As I looked around the table at the faces of people who loved and protected my daughter, I realized that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept the unacceptable, even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted. And sometimes, calling the police on your own family is exactly the right thing to do. Because in the end, the only family worth having is one that chooses love over loyalty, truth over comfort, and children's safety over adult convenience. That night, as I tucked Serafina into bed, she said something that perfectly captured what we'd both learned. "Mommy, I'm glad you called the police that night." "Why, sweetheart?" "Because it showed everyone that hurting kids is never okay, even in families. And now I know that you'll always protect me, no matter what. Always and forever, I promised." "Always and forever," she repeated, and fell asleep with a smile on her face. And that, I realized, was worth everything. The journey from that terrible dinner to this moment of peace had been long and difficult, but it had taught us both something invaluable: that love sometimes requires courage, that protection sometimes requires sacrifice, and that the right choice isn't always the easy choice. In calling the police that night, I hadn't just protected my daughter from one incident of violence. I had protected her from a lifetime of believing that her voice didn't matter, that her safety was less important than adult comfort, and that family loyalty meant accepting the unacceptable. I had also protected other children in our family, both present and future, by breaking a cycle of enabling and silence that had allowed harmful behavior to continue unchecked for years. Most importantly, I had shown my daughter that there were adults in her life who would always choose her well-being over their own convenience, her truth over comfortable lies, and her future over the past. As I turned off her bedroom light and walked downstairs to clean up the birthday party remnants, I felt a deep sense of peace. The house was quiet, but it was a good quiet. The quiet of safety, of security, of a child who could sleep soundly knowing she was protected and loved. My phone buzzed with a text message from my father. "Thank you for having the courage to do what was right, even when it was hard. Serafina is lucky to have you as her mother." I smiled, remembering how far we'd all come. The relationships that had survived were stronger now, built on honesty and accountability rather than silence and enabling. The ones that hadn't survived, well, some bridges are worth burning when crossing them would put your child in danger. Outside, I could hear the neighborhood settling into evening, dogs barking, children being called in for baths, the distant sound of a lawnmower, normal sounds of normal families living normal lives. But inside our little house, we had learned that there was nothing normal about having to choose between family peace and a child's safety. And we had learned that when forced to make that choice, there was only one right answer. I picked up Serafina's birthday crown from the kitchen table and smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new moments of joy and difficulty. But whatever came next, we would face it together, with the knowledge that we had the strength to do what was right, even when it cost us everything we thought we wanted. Because in the end, the most precious gift we can give our children isn't a perfect family or a conflict-free life. It's the unshakable knowledge that they are worth protecting, that their voices matter, and that someone will always choose them first. That night, I had given my daughter the gift of knowing she was worth more than family peace, and she had given me the gift of becoming the mother she deserved, one who would call the police on her own family if that's what it took to keep her child safe. It was a gift we would both carry with us for the rest of our lives. I would have protected you. Dad, that's exactly how I feel about Serafina. I know, and I think I owe you an apology. I think I owe Serafina an apology. This was more than I had dared to hope for. What changed your mind? I talked to Pastor Williams about it. He reminded me that our job as adults is to protect children, not to hurt them. He said that even if we believe in discipline, it should come from a place of love and guidance, not anger and control. I felt tears welling up. Dad, I never wanted to hurt you or Mom. I just wanted to protect Serafina. I know, sweetheart, and I'm sorry it took me so long to understand that. We talked for another hour. My father agreed to call off the family pressure campaign, and to have a serious conversation with my mother about their response to the incident. He also offered to pay for family counseling if we could work toward healing our relationships. "What about Cassius?" I asked. "Cassius is going to have to face the consequences of his actions. But maybe this will be the wake-up call he needs to get help for his anger issues." That weekend, Serafina and I were baking cookies when she asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Mommy, are you glad you called the police?" I stopped mixing the cookie dough and looked at her. "That's a big question, sweetheart. Why do you ask?" "Because it made everyone upset, and I don't like it when people are upset." I sat down so I was at her eye level. "Serafina, sometimes doing the right thing makes people upset. Sometimes people get angry when we ask them to change their behavior, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do the right thing." "So you think calling the police was right?" "I think protecting you was right. I think making sure you know that no adult should ever hit you was right. And I think teaching you that your safety matters more than keeping everyone happy was right." She nodded thoughtfully. "Even if it makes Grandma and Grandpa sad?" "Even then. But you know what? I think Grandpa is starting to understand. And maybe Grandma will too, eventually. And if they don't, then we'll love them from a distance, and we'll keep building a life where you feel safe and protected." She hugged me then, getting flour on my shirt, and said, "I love you, Mommy. Thank you for keeping me safe." In that moment, I knew beyond any doubt that I had made the right choice. It hadn't been easy, and it hadn't been without cost, but I had done what every parent should do: put their child's well-being first. The legal proceedings would continue, the family relationships would need time to heal, and there would be more difficult conversations ahead. But I had learned something important about myself. I was stronger than I had ever imagined, and I was willing to stand alone if necessary to protect my daughter. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept the unacceptable, even when it comes from the people you love most. And sometimes calling the police on your own family is exactly the right thing to do. As for Serafina, she continued to be the bright, joyful, caring child she had always been. She made new friends, excelled in school, and slowly learned to trust that the adults in her life would protect her rather than hurt her. And that, I realized, was the most important outcome of all.